So have you ever wondered what actually happens after you hit submit on a job application? Well, more and more, the first person who sees your resume isn't a person at all. It's an algorithm. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the algorithmic ceiling, these hidden biases in the AI tools that are deciding who even gets a shot at getting hired.
And this quote, wow, it just perfectly nails the problem. This comes from an insider at a massive tech company that tried and failed to build the perfect hiring machine. The idea was to engineer a revolution in meritocracy, but instead, it just took a decade of human bias and baked it right into the code.
And that leads us right to our main case study, Amazon's hiring machine that, well, basically learned to hate women. From 2014 to 2017, the company built this AI tool that was supposed to strip human prejudice out of hiring, but it ended up doing the exact opposite.
Okay, so this is where you can really see the massive gap between what they wanted to happen and what actually happened. On the left, you've got the plan, right? Crawl a decade of resumes, use a star rating, find the best of the best. Simple. But look at the outcome on the right. The system didn't learn how to spot top talent. No, it just learned to find more men. It was literally just mirroring the company's past instead of identifying the talent of the future. And this is where it gets just wild. The bias wasn't some vague, abstract thing. It was learning to hate specific words. Get this, if your resume mentioned women's chess club, your rating actually went down. And why? Because in all the data it was trained on, the word women's was a huge red flag that you were different from the majority of resumes they already had, which of course were from men.
So how on earth did a project with such a noble goal go so completely off the rails? Well, it all comes down to a really fundamental idea in computer science: garbage in, garbage out. It's all about how the biases of our past become the ironclad rules of our future. The whole thing really boils down to this GIGO principle. You feed an algorithm flawed, biased data, and you're going to get a flawed, biased result. It's that simple. Amazon fed its machine a decade of its own hiring data, which came from a time when the tech industry was, overwhelmingly male. So the AI didn't learn to find the best engineers, it just learned to find people who looked like the engineers they'd hired for the last 10 years. And this creates what Professor Ifeoma Ajwa brilliantly calls a closed loop. See, the algorithm screens people based on past biases. Then it helps hire more of the same kind of people. And that, in turn, creates a brand new data set for the next hiring round that's even more biased. It's just a vicious cycle of exclusion that feeds itself.
So let's break down the different flavors of bias that were at play here, because it was really a perfect storm. First up, you've got historical bias. That's from the decade of resumes from a male-dominated field. Then there's representation bias, because women were just a statistical minority in the training data, so the AI saw them as an outlier. And finally, you get algorithmic bias, which is where the AI itself starts getting creative and finds brand new ways to discriminate.
And here's the real kicker. The engineers, they realized their mistake. They tried to fix it by making the system gender blind, but the AI was just too clever for that. It just found other clues, or what we call proxies, like whether someone went to a women's college or played on a women's sports team, and it kept on penalizing them anyway. Just hiding the word woman was nowhere enough.
Okay, so let's zoom out a bit. How does one company's big screw-up turn into a systemic problem for pretty much every single person looking for a job today? Well, that brings us to what's called the algorithmic double bind.
I want you to just sit with this number for a second. 99%. That is the percentage of Fortune 500 companies using these kinds of automated hiring tools. So this isn't some niche tech world problem anymore. The risk of what's called algorithmic blackballing, where you're just silently rejected by a machine, has scaled to an absolutely massive level.
And for you, the applicant, these systems create 4 really distinct kinds of harm. Your resume can be tossed out in a black box without a human ever even laying eyes on it. A bad score can lead to permanent algorithmic exclusion, basically a negative mark that follows you around for years. You have to give up a ton of privacy. And finally, you get caught in this double blinding paradox.
And that leads us to this central, maddening paradox. We say we want blind hiring to prevent human discrimination, right? But if the system is truly blind to things like gender and race, how can anyone ever audit the data to see if the AI is discriminating based on, gender and race? The very thing we designed to create fairness is also hiding all the evidence of unfairness.
So the problem gets even more tangled and complex when these biased Western design models get applied all over the world.
We're talking about a massive global blind spot.
In many parts of the world, you find what researchers call noisy protected groups. These are basically populations where, because of social or political pressures, people might hide their true identity or background. This creates data that's incomplete, messy, or just plain misleading. And that garbage in, garbage out problem we talked about, it gets exponentially worse. So why do these global models fail so hard? Well, a few key reasons. The data itself is often corrupted. The AIs tend to favor what they know, Western, elite credentials, and they completely miss amazing local talent. And they just don't get the local cultural signs of what it means to be a great candidate. This all leads to what are called allocative harms, which is a fancy way of saying opportunities get sent to all the wrong people because the AI just doesn't understand the context.
So, where do we go from here? What's the path forward? We have to move from just hoping companies do the right thing to actually ensuring they do. We're talking about a big shift from what's called soft law to something you might think of as pharmaceutical-grade accountability.
And we are absolutely seeing this shift happen right now. The era of soft law, where companies just regulate themselves with some nice, non-binding ethical guidelines, that's coming to an end. We're moving toward legally binding frameworks, like the EU AI Act and New York City's Local Law 144, which actually mandate things like audits and transparency. So the big proposed solution is to start treating AI safety just like we treat drug safety. Think of it like a 4-phase trial. First, you test for safety in a closed virtual lab. Then, you test its effectiveness with limited, real-world human interaction. Then, you audit the heck out of it to make sure it aligns with fairness values. And finally, you monitor it out in the wild with a real plan to compensate anyone it harms. I mean, we would never release a new drug without doing this, so why on earth would we do it for an algorithm that literally shapes people's lives?
And all of this leaves us with one last really crucial question. As we build these incredibly powerful tools, what are we actually trying to do? Is fairness just another technical problem that we can solve with better code? Or is it a fundamental human value that our technology has a duty to defend? The answer we choose is going to define not just who gets hired, but really the kind of world that all of us want to live in.